Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to After Dark. I'm your host, Griswold Grimm. Tonight we'll be talking about cultural evolution, and I have with me this esteemed panel, which I will now allow to introduce themselves. George?
Hey everybody, and thanks for joining in here with After Dark. And Grizz, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel tonight. I'm George E. Green, founder and creator of the Lucid Living Immersive Mindfulness Training and Mentoring Program. And cultural evolution is one of my favorite subjects, so I'm glad to be in on the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Franklin?
My name's Franklin Stone. I'm very glad to get to be part of the show tonight. Thank you for inviting me in. Thank you for everybody for listening. I'm a stay-at-home dad professionally. It's a new thing to me. Our cultural evolution is changing in that way too. Dads are starting to become not breadwinners. It's an interesting transition. So hopefully I can add something positive to the conversation tonight.
I'm sure you will, Franklin. And the man who needs less of an introduction than me, Ammon Johns.
Hello. Okay, I won't give myself one. Ammon Johns, internet marketing consultant since, well, as long as there's been internet to be marketing on, really. And it's really, really early in the morning here, 5 a.m. So it's kind of not so much after dark as just about dawn.
Running on the late side. Okay, so to get this talk started, I think we should probably ballpark what cultural evolution means to us. Like, I think there's probably a spectrum between cult, subculture, culture, and if what we're going to talk about applies to all of them, that sort of thing. So, George, what does cultural evolution mean to you?
Well, I think in some respects, there's a big perception out there that we're in a stage of cultural de-evolution. And from my perspective, what fuels that is the fact that we're just fire-hosed with the media with all these negative information, images, and crises. What I feel is the undercurrent of evolution are events and collaborations and new groups of people that are getting together to innovate and collaborate and create. And so rather than trying to define something that's amorphous already, my desire is to direct our attention towards what is generative and what really represents the leading edge of both our cultural and personal evolution, but also our potentials to move from mere survival into thriving.
Excellent. Franklin, I'm associating you mentally with the Venus Project. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring you in, is because that's an attempt at cultural evolution, perhaps?
I'm a very sort of. I guess that's an okay way to say it. I'm more an advocate of the Zeitgeist movement than the Venus Project. Both are, trying to spread equally helpful ideas. That's all coming from the same vein, same train of thought. And it is an idea to try to harness the more positive aspects of cultural evolution that we've experienced over the last few decades, and pushing it towards things that we can now see as more salient to serious concerns that human beings should have. So how do we, use our technology, our science, our cultural evolution to create a more peaceful world and a more sustainable world?
Right. Sorry, it was the wrong project, and I would they kind of clash a little bit from time to time. So, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Ammon, culture evolution.
Yeah, I'm a keen history student, and it's interesting. I'm not sure how much we have evolved. I mean, people are still very much people. I think humanity is inherently contemporary. We kind of ignore the times. The oldest philosophies say that people don't change, that all things go round and round in a circle, the Chinese wheel of time or circle of life, the fact that history is doomed to repeat itself. I do think technology is changing us, though, in that it's allowing us to do all kinds of things, good and bad. It's allowing us to distract ourselves and give ourselves too much stress by overloading ourselves with information. It's allowing us to talk together in ways that we simply haven't had in the past. Although the idea of forums and democracy have been around since the ancient Greeks, it was very difficult to have a meaningful democracy when the fastest means of travel was foot. And the only people who could hear your voice were those that you could walk to. So I do think that technology is playing a huge part in what's changing us. I think also when that technology is doing things like expanding our lifespans exponentially, that has to play a huge part into our culture too. We have a much older generation than we've ever had before, and we know that over time young men are reckless, adventurous, they do brave things, and older men, and I'm coming into that category rapidly, we're a bit more cautious, we're a bit more resistant to change, we're a bit more just generally curmudgeonly, which I embrace.
It's good to have representatives from every perspective. I'm glad you brought up the technology aspect, because like when you first started curmudgeoning the notion of cultural evolution, I was like, well, weren't the Renaissance, weren't the Renaissance and weren't the Industrial Revolutions enough as evidence to say that we're evolving as a culture? And so I'm glad you did spin it a little that way, that the technology is making a big difference. And I wanted to bring up that I think the reason the technology is making such a big difference is because we can run personal cultural experiments. We can be parts of so many different varieties of cultures through this medium that we're sorting through the ones that aren't a good fit faster.
Yeah.
And
but
so,
I sometimes look back at Norse mythology. I love Norse mythology because that was the one religion that really understood everything has a cost. The chief deity of the pantheon gave his eye to get his powers. Everything in Norse mythology is understanding that to all things there is a cost. And we've actually kind of forgotten that and are just discovering it again and congratulating ourselves for evolving.
I personally think that there is a bit of a conflict between cultural ideas and evolution and the technology that it actually produces. You have physical hard pieces of science, physical hard pieces of technology that actually have real effects on people that we like to think about. Culture, as an idea or a concept, we think, will have certain effects on us, but when you actually put that technology on the ground and put it in people's hands, it's like Ammon's saying, you can have people completely disconnected from one another because of how they're using their technology. You can have people connecting too much and too frequently in an unhealthy way. And I feel like our biggest challenge is trying to understand that our cultural identity and our cultures that we've created are constructs. They're things that we've created, we've made them. And if we can try to align our cultural values with physical references, with the actual real world and the results that we actually see versus the ideas that we like, we might get better results from our technology and maybe not so dangerous results.
Agreed. Yeah. I think, Franklin, one of the things that you're speaking to here is the shadow side of technology, and I think technology is a part of our evolution. In fact, we've got Ray Kurzweil and the whole singularity movement. But before Ray and the singularity movement, that phrase was coined by Peter Russell in the book and the video What Hole in Time, which talks about the dynamics of evolution. And so I think rethinking our relationship or redefining our relationship with technology is imperative for us to move forward in a sustainable way, because we can be in a better relationship with the rapidity of our communications around the globe in a lightning's moment. But then I can be down on Pearl Street down here in Boulder and watch a better third of the population ghost walking while they're looking at their iPhones, not looking up, not making eye contact, running into people. And so there is that level of disconnect, but also our level of an ability to connect like we are right now this evening is incredible in the way of exchanging ideas and communicating and engaging with people in a meaningful way.
So,
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
so
I
the
think
question is, are we influencing culture by, are we adapting well, and are we teaching each other to adapt well, or?
Not gonna like my answer. I'll let everybody else talk to that first.
I'll
Well,
let Emmett go
define
first.
we first, Chris. I mean, who are we?
Humanity. Are we evolving toward a global society from a nation-state society? Would be a different way of saying it.
Certainly not as a majority group. I think that our evolution is at best a stumble right now. There are segments of the population that are more intentional and more innovative. I think what's critical is for all of us to move into a space of what we're for and what we imagine, what we desire to create, rather than being against something or fighting against, the established monolithic structures of governance and commerce and everything else. So I believe that what's awakening in us that makes a difference between our failing as a culture and a society and a planet and succeeding is being more intentional, period. And redirecting all our energy into creating new structures and new high agreements. And there's a lot of that going on. It's just that you have to look for it. You won't see it in media. You'll see it in different circles completely.
All right. Emmett, I cut you off earlier, so I'll let you go for a bit on whatever.
It's just one of those things. I don't think that so much culture is shaping technology as technology is shaping culture. Of course, I think that essentially we're still the same people, and we still want the same things that we always have. I'm not sure that I agree with George's assumption that the guy looking down at his iPhone and worrying about human rights and supporting Amnesty International on his phone and bumps into a guy in the street is less of a person. I'm not sure that maybe he hasn't got the local focus, but does charity have to begin at home? Aren't we a little bit more mindful of people all over the world rather than just those we meet today? And I think in that respect we have got better. I think the fact that we can be compassionate for people we've never met and probably never will, the fact that we can be compassionate to countries we've been at war with in human memory, even above our neighbours, is actually a good thing.
It's an interesting from a planeswalker perspective. It's like, where is it most efficient to embody your values? In meat space in your small town, or digitally and potentially globally? So that's a fun question. Franklin, you want to go for a bit?
I really agree with a lot of the things that Georgia said. I agree with a lot of the things that Ammon has said, and I feel like the way to move forward, because like Ammon's saying, the technology does shape our culture because it's the hard reference that our soft bodies have to react to. A big problem with people thinking about ideas like this are, the whole humans are hardwired for X or humans are hardwired for Z. And really what you have is a spectrum of potential reactions to the environment. You can't talk about how somebody is going to behave, despite their environment. They aren't going to react in a particular way if they don't have a stimuli there. So when you have the stimuli like particular types of technology, they can do those positive things. You can get that deeper sense of connectivity with the rest of the world through having this lens that we have through social media. And then on the other hand, you do have people that are ignoring their physical surroundings and potentially putting themselves in danger. I mean, it's against the law to be looking at your phone, you know, in your car, with good reason. But the fact that people were quick to do it, despite the knowing I'm not looking at the road right now, could kill me. You know, there's that genetic disconnect. My body wants to react to my technology. It's being pulled to it, and it's putting myself in harm's way, even though I am trying to send Grizz a message about human rights or what we could do to maybe help give people fresh water, you know? So it does play there, but I think if you ignore the fact that if you set the technology in such a way that it can be beneficial, you can get the positive reactions without the negative consequences, it drives back to intentionality, like you were saying. We have to design with purpose. There has to be intent, and there has to be understandings of how our reactions are really going to come about, not what our culture tells us they should be.
I like the notion that we're building the whole netizen subculture, and that those values will leak through into other interactions. I think there's probably a lot of analogies to travel being an enlightening experience, and we kind of are, but it's just the destinations are not recognizable as such because of the interface. So the question becomes, how much influence do we have on shaping our culture toward one that we approve, whether that's we'd like to see it this way or we'd like to see it that way? How much influence do we have in that direction, and how do we start? If anybody wants to go for that.
Yeah, as much as you can take. It's one of those things. Some people will have almost no influence, and others will be able to gain a huge amount. It's surprising what you can do and what people can decide to support. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of countries that have openly committed themselves to democracy, even if they sometimes regret it and sometimes cheat a bit. And ultimately, they are kind of trapped by that. You know, the netizens are getting more and more powerful, and most societies, we are in control. And the countries that even thought that that wasn't the case are suddenly finding that their people are a lot more powerful than they thought. Obviously, we've got recent events in the Middle East, but we've also got, you know, what's happened in the east of Europe as well. I think we are starting to get to a point where the people are once again starting to frighten governments, which is where it's supposed to be. There was good reason that the founding fathers in America decided that, you know, the right to bear arms was important. It was right that government should worry that you were armed. And I think more governments need to kind of become a little bit scared of their population and realise that they're there to serve them, and that we tolerate them, not that we're subservient to them.
Ideologically, I agree. In practice, I don't feel like there is currently, within the modes that we have available to us, outside of something like this interface with our technology, creating solidarity. I remember, I think it was Grizz, you said cultural evolution, or a part of it is that growing, or no, I'm sorry, it was George, growing from seeing nations and associating with nationalist ideologies, or that's your tribe, to a broader tribe, a more global tribe. And I don't think that happens until you can experience that plight of, you know, other people as your own. And this tool, and as more and more people have access to it, you know, I'm every day seeing more and more people joining my circles, even on Google Plus, from other countries. I don't even understand a lot of their posts, but every once in a while there is content that brings me there. It brings me there. It lets me see the person's plight or where they might have freedom that I don't. And because I think all human beings do want autonomy, and they have different ideas about how to achieve autonomy and limited means of representing themselves to achieve that autonomy through their government structures, through other power structures like accumulated wealth, we are at a crossroads with that process. And I think the only way to get past that crossroads is to hit a tipping point of human solidarity, where there are, maybe 15 or 20 really core values that most of the people on the planet can agree with, where it doesn't matter what a moneyed interest or what a government says, there's just too many bodies. If the people in China were well educated enough to where all billions and billions of them went and sat in somewhere and just shut down a whole region of their country, there aren't enough bullets. There aren't enough bombs. And if there were, why would you fight your own citizens to the point where nobody is left to produce things that are to the benefit of the government or the people that are in power anymore? That stark contrast between their interests and the interests of the greater group, they start to pan out at a certain point when you reach that tipping point, when that 99% of people gets that they really do have the power and then the information to enact that power against the structures that they feel shackled by currently.
Yeah, but what can I do from sitting behind my computer? Because I really don't want to get it out there.
Talk to people. This is the best thing you can do.
Slack to this?
I think the difference that can be made, and made effectively and sustainably, are differences in actions that stand apart and away from inciting fear or, again, fighting against. There have been these rare incidences where there's a groundswell of solidarity, and institutions and governments took notice. But the issue here is how to maintain and sustain solidarity and consensus in a way where the institutions, the governments, our supposed leaders start paying attention, and as long as we're loyal consumers and sheeple, then there's very little motivation for anyone to pay attention or to care. So I think our cultural evolution depends on our establishing a new high agreement with each other and a consensus with a strategy that sustains it.
I want to say that I've moved away from that, and that when I first came on G+, that I was pushing that's hey, everybody pay attention, this is what we need to work on. But more and more it's just you can hold the general direction of where you want things to go and help who you can help. Spend the energy, because you're spending the energy whatever you do, and whatever the most direct connections is where you have the most influence.
I agree.
And that's the direction I'm leaning these days toward, to embody our culture, the cultural evolution that we desire.
Mm-hmm.
That we just do everything we can for the people that support us, and we lift each other up as best we can. And it's the close bonds that we can do that most effectively at.
That's what I would describe as the consensus I'm talking about. It's on the ground. It's our immediate tribe. It's who we're most influenced by, and who we influence through our interactions and our actions and our embodiments. I'm in total agreement, Chris. And
speaking of those that we are influenced by the most, I really ought to do a shout out to William Rock, Mark Seidel, Zara Altair, Jeffrey Dodd, Phil Boyer, the people doing such for me here today. And I didn't pull you guys in today, and I apologize, but I see you there, and I'm so glad you're with us. I think we got about 5 minutes left, so who wants to go before we go?
I feel bad because it almost looks like Ammon, wants to speak. I know he didn't really have a chance at it, but I do want to say that's why I do what I do. It's why I advocate what I advocate for. It's trying to create these points of solidarity between people, because I understand that most people do want autonomy, and I know that a lot of people don't understand how to get there or where to get there, and I feel like trying to use old structures, old ideas to get to that place actually ends up hindering the effort to move forward. And if we can, it's like Buckminster Fuller says, don't fight the old system, don't make the old system work for you, change the system. If we can do stuff that's more efficient, it will just be what's done. Then you don't need a command structure or a hierarchy. There isn't a group of people telling folks not to put forks into outlets. You put the information out there, and nobody wants to do it. There's not an epidemic of people drinking bleach. It's just not. It's not prevalent because the information's out there, and people don't want to put themselves in harm's way, and they have the information about how not to. And if we produce those solutions, if we put those ideas forward, and people will say, well, this just works better. Why would I do something this old way, this way that's not as efficient, that doesn't work for me? It's not going to happen overnight. These ideas aren't going to promulgate in minutes. But, if we're consistent and present them over time, I think people can move forward towards a better shared future.
Yeah, I think there's actually more people who are eating themselves to death through not being careful what they're putting into their body today than were killing themselves with arsenic to whiten their face in the Elizabethan times. So I'm not sure that I really think that just putting good information out there is enough. I think there is an inherent self-destructive aspect to humanity. I think we sometimes, well, mostly, choose the short term over the long term. In kids, you do this. You put a sweet in front of a kid and put the bag up on a high shelf, and you say, if you don't eat that sweet for an hour, you can have the whole bag. That sweet will be gone in 5 minutes. They just cannot resist, and I don't think we ever completely grow out of it.
Okay, so should we then, those of us who are willing to make the changes and do what we're supposed to, should we pull an Ayn Rand and all build an island somewhere and let the rest of the world go to pot? I mean, what should the people who are willing to make, how do we work together and network together to help each other in that environment where there's so many people that are apathetic and just don't care?
I think you've just got to differentiate between everybody and people like yourself. If you can pass the spark to one person, you've broken even and you've carried it on for a generation. If you can pass the spark to 2 people in your entire life, you've doubled your number. I think we've got to stop thinking of trying to influence everybody and each focus on doing 2 or 3 people in our lifetime. The change is going to be gradual. It's not going to be some wonderful, great, revolution until we get to the tipping point. And I don't think we're close to it yet. So I'm not sure I'm going to see it in my lifetime, but I think it's coming, and I think it's going to come gradually. And the more we rush, the more resistance we create to it. Oh, another one banging on about that, instead of just picking the ones who are open to it in the first place.
All right, Franklin, I'll give you a little bit, but we're on our way out. So, final statement.
I really do, again, just appreciate the opportunity to, come in and talk with you guys. This was a wonderful conversation. Even when everybody didn't agree on certain points, it was a positive and, fun talk. Thank you so much.
George?
Again, thanks for the invitation, and I really appreciate the way we can share our individual points of view and ideas. For me, in parting, I think there's 2 dynamics clearly in evolution. One's entropy, the collapse of an existing system, and extropy, which is the expansion and development of a new system. So when we see people eating themselves to death, that's part of the entropy. That's part of the old system that's dissolving right now. And what we focus on is what becomes real for us. So our choices are always, regardless of our opinion, our choices are always in the best interest of ourselves ultimately, and our family and our communities. So I love our conversation. I look forward to it evolving and continuing. Thank you.
I'm really glad to have it. I mean, this was a lot of fun. It was weird for me not bringing the audience in more, but I'm gonna go play in the comments later, and we're having an after party. So if you guys want to stick around at all, I'm gonna let the audience come in and play for a little bit. Thank you so much for being on the show with me, though, whether you split or stay, and really, thanks a lot, guys.
Yay.
Bye, everybody.